concerning the U.S. Defense Department and Hollywood.
Yeah, so last month I received over 1,000 pages of documents from the Pentagon, which is the Department of Defense in the United States. And the 1,000 pages of documents revealed the extent to which the Defense Department has involved itself within the screen entertainment, within screen entertainment productions over the past 10 or so years. We were quite surprised by the level of involvement, or not by the level of involvement, but by the amount of shows that it was involved with. This was a Freedom of Information Act request put in by myself and another researcher called Tom Secker. And they've been involved in one way or another with TV shows like MasterChef, Undercover Boss, Cupcake Wars, all sorts of, and of course fictional shows like Army Wives as well. And all of these, and the pages and pages of material there suggested that, that they had quite a wide-ranging interest in moulding Hollywood and TV productions to their own dictates where possible.
The Defense Department has been involved in all of these productions and nobody knew about, but why is it so controversial about it? What's the controversy, since we know that the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, the CIA have been involved in quite a few productions in the past, Iron Man, Transformers, Homeland, just to name a few?
I think the controversy is the fact that there is no controversy in a way, because if the Pentagon was to release all of its documentation, or was to explain everything about what it has done within these TV shows and within various different films like you mentioned, then I think that would cause some uproar, because it would be showing that it made at least some kind of political changes to a lot of the major films that we know and love, whether that's Transformers Transformers series, or the Terminator Salvation film, or any number of other movie productions over the past 10 years or so. We know that it would be controversial because in 2004, David Robb released a book called Operation Hollywood, where he did have full access to the censored material by the Pentagon throughout the 20th century. And he was able to show that many shows throughout the, many films throughout the 20th century had been adversely affected and in effect censored, because he was able to show correspondence between the Pentagon and the TV producers. And he was able to show film scripts that had lines through them, please change this and so on. Now, the fact that we no longer have that material from the past 10 or 15 years, I think, is the controversy here. I think it's an issue about about the Pentagon's accountability to the public, and the Pentagon is not being accountable to the public, because it is, albeit providing finally information to me and to Tom Secker about the shows that it's involved in, it very specifically no longer provides any details about the changes that it requires to scripts.
Why should the Pentagon be held accountable?
Because the media in all forms should be, and I'm saying should be because I'm not saying that it is. I'm not saying it's realistic to expect governments to behave well, but I'm saying governments should behave well, just as we expect a head teacher to behave well, just as we expect people in a workplace to behave well. And so the government should be accountable for what it does, but it is not. And it will provide this information to say, oh yes, oh yeah, we do work on these films, and we do work on video games like Medal of Honor and so on.
Do you think the extent is clear to the viewers? I mean,
no, the extent is completely unclear to the viewer.
And do you think it really influences the viewers that much that it changes how we view the world, how we view certain political political situations?
That's a very different question, and that's a question about the impact that the media can have on people. And you know that debate. It's as old as the hills. How much can someone influence someone else? How much can the telly influence someone else? Well, no one knows for certain, but it is clear that in separate statements from the CIA, FBI, Department of Defense, various different presidents, including the president of, including Stalin, for example, including Lenin, including Goebbels, all of these people have said cinema is the most important medium for influencing the masses and for influencing historical debate generally.
Do you think it's Hollywood's responsibility to give correct accounts of historic events?
My personal view is that Hollywood should not. I think Hollywood, as well as everybody else, should not lie. I think that's really important. I think that they shouldn't be deliberately.
But isn't it art? It's culture.
It can be, but is it art and is it culture to remove from a film like Black Hawk Down a character because in the real world he was from the military and he'd raped his child? Now, does that somehow make the film more artistic? I mean, that seems to me like removing something for a very deliberate political reason. Is it art or is it culture to remove from a film like Wind Talkers, the Nicolas Cage film, a scene of American Marines ripping the teeth out of dead Japanese soldiers?
So the intention is clear, what they're trying to do?
The intention is very clear. I mean, it's not always clear, because nothing can be black and white when you're dealing with these complicated pieces of cinematic material. But there are cases that we can point to, that I point to in a forthcoming article, and myself and Tom Secker will, and here as well, that are very clear political decisions. And actually, the Department of Defense does admit this, albeit in a very, buried under all sorts of other things. It does say, and I can't remember the exact form of words, but it says, we want to promote retention of military personnel. We want to promote the promote recruitment of military personnel, which is a code really for saying we want to recruit kids. So we're targeting kids films like Transformers so that we can create a positive image of the military. But one of the final things that it says on one of its documents is, and we also don't want to encourage any activity by individuals who want to oppose the policy of the government. Now, that could be taken as one thing. Of course, it's fine. We wouldn't want any TV show or film to promote terrorism or something. But that kind of definition can be cut both ways. And basically, they're saying we want to support government policy, and indeed they do, because there's a very clear example would be from a film that was going to be made that was going to involve Sigourney Weaver from the mid-90s, called Countermeasures, which the Pentagon rejected the script for it and said, we have no reason to denigrate the White House because it was a film about a conspiracy. And we have no reason to remind the public of the Iran-Contra affair. The Iran-Contra affair being a horrible scandal involving slush funds and drug money.
They just don't want Hollywood to remind the people of how terrible certain policy decisions were?
Of course they don't want to do that. And those are the same, those officials are still the ones who are saying who are there now.
Should that be Hollywood's responsibility? I come back to that question.
I don't think that Hollywood should have an obligation to be pumping out material that is, that is accurate historical material. I think Hollywood should be there to entertain. Mm-hmm. Definitely, that is the primary.
But freely, right?
But freely, without the influence of government. And it should not be entertaining with deliberately inserted lies or have information that is deliberately withdrawn from that purely for political reasons.
And aren't some alterations also quite petty? I mean, in Golden Eye, they talked about a joke saying the U.S. losing the Vietnam War, and they wanted it removed. Isn't that also very, very petty and specific?
Of course, yeah. And in Tomorrow Never Dies as well, there was one of the villains was an American admiral, and so and the Pentagon asked for that to be changed, and so the national identity of one of the military figures was altered. Now, these are petty things. I'm certainly not an absolutist on this kind of thing. I think that Hollywood should be very free and should be very creative and should have a full range, should say the full range of things.
Why are always, if you say a full range of things, why are the villains a lot of the time Russian? Isn't that something that has been embedded in our minds? Do you think that serves a purpose?
Well, it serves many purposes, doesn't it? But it's not, it depends how, when you say serve a purpose, you're implying that means a conscious thing or a deliberate program. That's a different question. It's much harder to get to the bottom of that. I'd say that most of those things are not orchestrated by, bear in mind that these really are organizations that are entertainment liaison offices. They are not huge conspiracies involving the president and his entire entourage saying, right, we need to get a movie out that demonizes Russia or whatever. But they do pick up on these national moods, and they do and there is often some spinning that's gone on there. And occasionally that does actually happen. Sorry to get away from your Russia questions just for a second, but in the case of Green Berets, for example, from 1968, that film happened at the height of the Vietnam War when no one wanted to see a pro-American film. The film flopped. But that happened because John Wayne, the cowboy actor, wrote to President Lyndon Johnson and said, I want to make a film promoting your war in Vietnam. So it does sometimes happen where there are higher level people involved. Same thing with, say, Zero Dark 30. Zero Dark 30, the Bin Laden killing film, had involvement from many of the highest members. They didn't, who cares about the entertainment liaison office, the specific, they went to many of the top people.
Do you think Clint Eastwood did the same thing for American Sniper?
I think in that case,
that is a, I don't know, a very well produced American propaganda film. I watched 30 minutes and it was enough. It was almost, it was so obvious that it kind of looked like satire.
Yes, I know exactly what you're saying, but I think this points to a bigger problem in Hollywood, which is, and certainly I do not think that the Department of Defense and these other government organizations are the only problem by any means. I think there's a broader culture of general, not xenophobia, but just myopic nature, just a blind sort of nationalist, sort of fervour and ignorance and lack of care for people, not just people outside of the United States, but often even people outside of Los Angeles and Hollywood, Los Angeles and New York, because those are the main cities that are always the ones that are about to be terrorized or bombed or eaten by a shark or whatever it's going to be.
I have one last question for you. What do you think is more influential, the news or Hollywood? Well,
again, that gets... How can I answer that? I mean, Hollywood is all pervasive and everybody watches it from every age. It gets into every corner of the world. Over a quarter of the world's population have seen a James Bond film. And bearing in mind only about a fifth of the world's population have ever made a phone call, that would suggest that that message is getting out there about the power of the West, about the decency of the West, of Western governments, of the West, and of Western systems of governance. So that to me suggests that maybe Hollywood is more powerful even than the news, but it's a very difficult thing to measure.
Is it important for American imperialism?
I think any nation, any government, any state marshals its...
But America is the most powerful nation in the world, or so it likes to present itself.
Yes, I completely agree with you. But all nations do this thing of using their media. I think what's interesting, it doesn't mean that America is any better or any worse, but I think it's interesting that America is able to influence its entertainment media to such a degree, and seemingly more than these other than other countries. And that's, I think, because they've got very well organised entertainment liaison offices from all of their government, and also because their films are so big and there's so much money put into them that they're always trying to save money by getting things like aircraft carriers and helicopters and huge numbers of men. That's a testament to the power of Hollywood and to this huge scale of Hollywood, rather than necessarily to the nefarious nature of the American government.
So should we all just now stop going to the movies, or should we just be more critical and hold ourselves accountable for what we see? What do you think? What's a conclusion?
I think they're both the same thing, aren't they? I mean, I think if you don't like watching propaganda, then don't go and watch films that are...
How many movies right now are in the cinemas that are propaganda?
Well, I mean, at the moment there's a film about to come out which is the next in the line of Mission Impossible films. Now that's had CIA influence in the past. What exactly they've changed on those scripts we don't know, because the documentation is so buried. But
does that make it propaganda?
I think, well, one of the parts of the definition of propaganda is if it is done covertly, if it's black propaganda, it's done to influence and to lie and to deceive, and done without there being clear accountability. So all of those things combined and make it into something that would approach the classic concept of propaganda. I'm reluctant to use the word propaganda, to be honest with you, because I think unless it fulfills all of those criteria, it's a bit of a loaded term. But it is nevertheless still very biased media communication, and there needs to be better accountability for it. That's the end of that's basically what should happen.
Thank you.
Let's go!
Think you could do it, Joe? Could you do it if you had to?
Nakina, smash!